Standing up to the man comment was actually cringeworthy. But I will let you figure out why.
You see, Otangelo, one of the benefits of biblical presuppositional reasoning, it brings greater clarity to the clouded issue of philosophical attacks upon God. In biblical presuppositional thinking, we always maintain the creator-creature distinction. Okay?
Okay.
So how can God be evil in a creator-creature distinction? Because there wouldn't be anything that is not God, that doesn't derive from God, that God would have to, in an obligatory way, conform himself to.
You know, I see no ontological impossibility that there could be a God which nature is that it pleases him to create a world where there would be maximum harm. I've still not seen an argument from you.
But you see, you're segueing away from the concept of evil to pain or harm or suffering. Okay? Now, in the creator-creature distinction, is there anything that God is that must be commensurate with or conform to something that he is not?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, evil, for example.
No, you're not thinking clearly on this. What is it? What obligates God to conform himself to something that is extrinsic to himself? What would that be?
His own nature and character.
You're not. That's not an answer to my question. I said, what is it that is extrinsic to God that God would have to comport himself to?
Nothing.
Then God can't be evil.
Can I ask a question here, Otangelo? Are you just saying that you're conceding what Darth is saying? You're saying there's a structure by which God is not contingent upon anything, but that the contents within that structure are flipped, such that what we now consider good would be what we now consider bad.
Who are you asking?
I'm asking Otangelo what he's asking. Did you get that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, I said you agreed with Darth about the structure because you're saying God cannot conform to something outside of himself. And you're saying that, and you're agreeing that evil is a privation. You're saying, what if the contents of that structure were different, such that good was a privation of evil, essentially?
Yeah, and what is your question?
Okay, well, never mind. I wanted you to understand the structure that Darth is putting forth, and then see if you're just trying to essentially say, what if the contents of how that structure you agree is working were in reverse?
I have a question.
I'm sorry, I'm
what's
not
the distinction
understanding
between macro and microevolution?
What is the distinction?
Yeah. What's like the distinction?
Well, there could be different distinctions, but one distinction would be that in microevolution, we just have mere change in biological reproduction. In macroevolution, we would have an innumerable number of mutations building the genome, where very long genomic sequences that code for complex anatomy and physiology arise where they didn't previously exist.
Okay, thanks.
So you see, the problem with Tangelo is you're not keeping in mind persistently the creator-creature distinction.
Okay.
Right? And that is integral in biblical presuppositional thinking.
Well, maybe it should be more clearly defined what we mean when we say good and evil.
Well, when we say something is good, we're saying that it adheres to some standard.
Right. And what would be that standard? I guess like Ten Commandments.
Well, that standard will either be commensurate with the mind and purpose of God, or it won't be.
Okay.
So, for example, when the Nazis planned to exterminate as many Jews and Poles and others, and they used gas chambers and then burned the bodies, this was a good solution for them. Okay? Likewise, when we have demonic politicians in the West, like in America, who want to kill as many unborn babies as possible, for them, baby-killing factories is a good thing because it measures up to that standard. Okay?
Well, it brings some kind of utility, right?
Right. So the standard of the good will either be objective or subjective. Okay? So for some people, for some people, killing as many unborn babies as possible is not good. For other people, like Democrats, it's a wonderful thing. It's a blessing to kill as many unborn babies. They think that that's good. And the reason why they disagree is because they have a different standard of what the good is.
So let me put it in another way. I think it is good to say always the truth, right?
Yeah.
So if someone is lying, that's the opposite, that's not good.
Is there a point here?
Right? So the devil is the father of lies because he always says lies, right? So I come back to my initial point. God's nature is
school with. He was a few years older than me. He was an all-state wrestler. You know, he had all the opportunity in the world to go to college on a scholarship and be somebody. And he got into an altercation that ended up putting him in prison for 2 to 4 years. And he's never been out for longer than 3 months since. He's an extreme radical now. A lot of reasons I can understand why. The last time I was in jail, which has been about almost 7 years ago, he had to come back to the county jail to serve some case or whatever. Long story short.
You're refuting that possibility.
So you've abandoned your Christian worldview?
I am making a hypothetical here. All what I am saying is
that hypothetical is incongruent with the Christian worldview.
Yes, of course it is.
So you've abandoned the actuality of the Christian worldview?
No, of course I'm not. I told you that I am doing a hypothetical here.
Well, then that hypothetical is just simply imaginary.
Yes, correct. It's imaginary.
Yeah, it's inconsistent with the actual state of affairs.
Yes, of course it is inconsistent. But all what I am saying, coming back to the first thing that I said,
you're not understanding. Listen, this is something that cannot exist. It can only exist as a incoherent imagination. If you're going to still retain the Christian worldview, that hypothetical is not ultimately and fundamentally coherent because it is inconsistent with the ground of all being. Like if I said to you, what if there's a deer in my backyard right now? Okay. Well, that hypothetical is not incongruent with the ground of all being, whether or not there's a deer in my backyard. But your hypothetical is incongruent with the ground of all being, that is the God of the Bible. So your hypothetical is not coherent.
I think you're not understanding, Dart. All I am saying is that, ontologically speaking, we cannot deeper ground God's character or God's truthfulness, because that's how he revealed himself to us. That's what he is. That's his nature. We believe it. But that's simply what it is. There is no deeper grounding or explanation of God's nature. But that means that theoretically or hypothetically, there is nothing that impedes or makes it impossible that God could simply have another kind of character, that he could be just like the devil.
You're not understanding. The scripture says in Titus 1, and it also says in Hebrews, God cannot lie. He can't.
Right.
So you see, this is the problem. You're not consistent in your biblical thinking.
Of course I am, Dart. I'm just trying to
whatever hypothetical you're going to bring up, it's going to have to be at least congruent with the Christian worldview. Okay? So if I say to you, there could be a deer in my backyard, but let's say there doesn't happen to be a deer in my backyard. But I said there could be. That hypothetical is not incongruent with the Christian worldview. But the hypothetical that you are giving is completely at odds with the Christian worldview.
Yes, of course it is, Dart.
So what you are doing is you are invoking an alternative worldview that cannot and does not exist.
Well, it doesn't exist. We agree both on that. But the question remains if it is ontologically impossible.
It is ontologically impossible.
So that people are not paying large service fees and not being asked to pay 1 to 2 years of.
He isn't somebody that can function in this world. That that thought and that environmental input over a period of time creates a determining factor in his brain where this thing happens, I react like that. Does that make sense?
It not only makes perfect sense, but I agree with it.
Psychological programming, brainwashing, indoctrination.
The more colloquial, politically correct definition would be institutionalized. You've been behind bars for so long, you've learned how that system works, you've adapted to that, your environment, and you can't survive outside that environment. You've been institutionalized. That very good point when talking about determinism, and I'm going to remember that one from now on.
No problem. And go ahead.
Yeah, again, so we know that from psychology. We don't need like an ultimate absolute determinism factor in order to understand this whole programming issue. This has been going on for a long time. We've been having this discussion about incarceration for a minute, and the American system just seems to want to stay the same regardless. It's not it's not new, and it's not the absolute determinism on the the on the quantum side of things or anything like that, that's brought us there. We've been there for a while.
Well, I'm going to push back on that quickly, and then we'll go to Benjamin. For those of you that don't know, and I don't know his name, but the district attorney of San Francisco was just recently recalled. Our district attorney in Los Angeles, he is the subject of a recall effort, and as well as there is a new district attorney, I believe, in New York. And this is a current wave that's going on where district attorneys are being put in that, for lack of better words, are soft on crime. I think more politically correct would be a more progressive way, but a lot of the criminal, I don't want to say the criminal justice system, but, well, no, sure. We'll talk about the laws involving stealing and crime in the past couple of years, whether or not you want to attribute that to the Democrats getting in or whatever. I'm not going to go down there, but we can. But we're having a huge crime in the United States in the major metropolises, the major cities have increased, and I believe one of the main determining factors is that our district attorneys and our criminal justice systems have been getting soft on crime. A lot of major retail outlets in Los Angeles and in the Bay Area have been recently closed in the past year, or so, because of crime. People are stealing things. They're being arrested. They're being let go the same night. The no bail system, which has recently been growing, no bail. People are promising to return on their own recognizance, and they're not. And I said it, but let's go to Benjamin. Hey, Benjamin.
Well, I just heard somebody say, we know something from psychology. And I just wanted to ask, how many unreproducible studies does it take to know something?
I would say 0.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you can know something from psychology if the discipline does not require rigor and does not have reproducible studies, nor expect them.
Well, you can know something even if studies are false, right? It may not make it true, but you can know it.
Yeah, I just don't understand what it means to know something. If it's not reproducible...
You don't understand what it means to know something, okay?
If the thing that you think is not a reproducible thing, then what is the epistemical basis for knowledge?
Okay, now you're talking a little bit of philosophy. You're a little bit over my head.
Knowing is about philosophy. Sorry, there's no...
No. Your Uncle Steve admits his ignorance. You're going to have to dumb it down a little for your Uncle Steve. But your Uncle Steve would...
What does it mean to know something if we can know something about psychology, given that psychology is just...
Well, you're asking
reproducible studies.
Benjamin, you're asking multiple questions. If you could be so, unless someone else wants to answer, but if you're going to ask...
Well, maybe Chris can answer, because Chris used the phrase. He said, we know from psychology X, and I just was wondering, how do we know anything from psychology, given it's unreproducible?
If Chris wants to engage, the two of you go for it. Just keep it respectful and don't talk over each other. Go for it.
Yeah, not much, because this will go on forever. Benjamin and I have discussed this at length.
The two of you know each other. Okay.
Chris is awesome.
You guys go for it. Take 5 minutes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it was demonstrated the other day, we do know things, they are repeatable, through psychological studies. We are aware of the placebo effect and its physiological effects. We know how that works. Like, I don't understand the question. We've been through it over and over. There are many things about psychology that we understand. What we were just talking about, it's this simple. Psychology is the study of the mind. And when you sit down and talk to somebody about how your mind works, you're doing psychology. And when you start figuring out that there are patterns in your behavior, you're literally looking at repeatability. So
yeah, so the challenge I'm going to have
about how you think it's not repeatable.
The challenge I'm going to have here, Chris, is that astrology is also the study of the stars and the way the star patterns influence activities on Earth. The problem is there's no causality. Even if there's correlation, and even if there's suggestibility, there's no relationship. It's not clear to me that psychology has an epistemology that is improved over that of astrology.
Yeah, really weird, man. Like totally different.
You don't think the study of psychology has approved more than the zodiac? Is that what you just said?
It's not clear to me that it's more rigorous than astrology. Most of the studies published under psychology are not reproducible. So, this is the same quality of epistemology as astrology.
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Whoa. Let's concentrate on the one thing. Most of the studies published about psychology are not reproducible. That is what you said, right?
Correct.
Well, hopefully we get a psychology expert on the stage that can comment on that.
There's no such thing, but good luck.
There's no such thing. Really? I thought there was such thing as an expert.
Well, you can't be an expert in
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Studies.
Okay, Benjamin, with all due respect, you have a tendency to interrupt. You kind of interrupted Chris, and you definitely interrupted me. So let's try it again. Let's go with this. What's your definition of an expert?
Somebody who is skilled in the field.
I would say it's somebody who has a comprehensive knowledge of the field.
Okay, back to the same problem.
Maybe that's the same thing. Maybe that's the same thing. Okay, fair enough. So when we have experts and when we deal, I'm not a lawyer, but when we have court of law, a lot of times each side brings an expert. Both of those experts are stipulated to be experts, but they have different points of view. So when we talk about an expert, we talk about people that have a comprehensive knowledge. This is why when you said you weren't aware that there were any experts in psychology, I completely disagree with that statement.
Would you agree that there are or are not experts in astrology?
First, let's go to your statement that there are no experts in psychology. I completely disagree with that because there are many people that have a comprehensive knowledge about psychology. Now, if you want, you can disagree with me. Go ahead.
Well, we could argue that there are experts about religion, too. And I know several. The problem
and we can also go off topic like you just did if you want to. If you want, you can simply
I'm not sure it's off topic.
Well, it is because you haven't answered the question twice now. So I'll ask it a third time.
Are there experts in psychology? Look, your definition of an expert is a person who knows something about the topic. And the problem is,
no, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. That's not what I said. But that's okay.
It has to do with knowledge.
Okay, I'll repeat it for the...
You said an expert is somebody knowledgeable in the field, I think.
Well, look, based on your definition, Ben, are you an expert or not? I mean, who gives a fuck what Steve thinks? What do you think?
And we'll go to LJ in a moment. But just for clarification, and replays are on, I will say it for a third time, and then, Ben, we can go on to something else, because obviously you don't want to answer the question. The definition of an expert is someone not who has some knowledge. It's somebody who has comprehensive knowledge of a topic. A lot of knowledge?
Sure.
A lot. Oh, great. I'm glad you
agree.
That's all I wanted to hear.
That's a useful definition of an expert. The problem you have,
yes,
if I may,
yes, you may,
is that the word know is root in knowledge. Knowledge is to know things. And psychology may not have an epistemology that is conducive to knowing things. If its studies, if its assertions are not reproducible, then they fall into the same category as astronomy and religion. Yes, you can have religious experts.
Hey, LJ, let him talk, LJ.
You can have experts on astrology, but experts in a field that has no reproducible results are really just decorative positions.
Again, psychology has repeatable results. Your claim that it doesn't is ridiculous.
Cool.
I agree with that.
I can live with that situation. I think the reported events are quite in my favor on this. If you think that most results in psychology are repeatable, I think that they're not.
I
think this is why the field is not effective.
Well, you know what? In Benjamin's defense, he's saying most. Okay? I will tell you this. There are clearly reproducible studies in psychology, which is basically where, and now I think it's the DSM-5 or the DSM-6 comes into play. If that is basically the gold standard, or pardon the pun, the Bible of psychology, the DSM-5, the DSM-6. If I'm not mistaken, everything that's in the DSM-5 or 6 is reproducible. So now, whether or not it covers the majority of the studies, I know this. It covers the studies that are considered believable and credible and the accepted standard. So now, Benjamin, you're saying most. All I will tell you is that my understanding is that everything that's in the DSM-5 and the DSM-6, which is the book on psychology, is based on a reproducible study. That being said, we'll go to LJ now. LJ, you're going to lighten us up. I know you are. Hey, buddy, what's up?
Hey, Uncle Steve.
Hey, LJ.
I'm just so proud of you for hosting this safe space, creating a space for us.
LJ, I got news for you. This is not a safe space, but go ahead. Yeah.
God. All right, well, fuck it. Anyway,
oh, well, fuck it. Yeah, go ahead.
Great risk.
So, let me ask you a question. Do you think, I was in a room with a lot of theists, and they, the definition of seeing the devil and everything basically was what I was hearing in the room, right? So, for example, they're like, yoga is the devil. Fucking, it was like the
yoga is the devil.
Oh, if you didn't know, yoga is the devil.
James, I did not know.
Did you guys know that?
No.
Want me to enlighten you, Steve? I will enlighten the shit out of you.
If you don't hate yourself, go do yoga, and then you will.
No, so basically, okay, listen. Basically, if you believe in certain books, this is what the argument they're making, then you shouldn't practice yoga because it's a pagan religion, and there are poses that stem from a pagan religion. And so,
you mean like Halloween? You mean Halloween is a pagan practice?
Right.
The kids that trick or treat, they're doing the devil's work. That one I've heard.
I mean, listen. Halloween is definitely not the devil's work, right? It's not.
It's the Candy Corporation's work. Trust your Uncle Steve. You know how much candy they sell?
So my question to you, Uncle Steve,
yes, sir.
For Oz of Clubhouse, are you on board with that? Do you think yoga is the devil?
You know, I think in ways it could be, because the very few times that I have done yoga and I look at all of the young, gorgeous women in their tight yoga pants and halter tops and flat stomachs, your Uncle Steve thinks of doing very devilish things. So, yeah, I think that's a good argument.
Anybody else? Are you guys on the same page with Uncle Steve?
They're a bunch of sun worshippers.
I don't know if yoga is the devil, but I've done hot yoga once, and it feels like.
You know what? The one where no ugly people are allowed?
Bobby Boucher.
You guys heard of anal sunbathing?
Oh, there we go.
Okay, that That one. I don't think we don't want to go down that road now. However,
don't want to go down that road.
Yeah, right. But in the Ginger Shades experience, a risque soiree on mancavepodcasting.com, she goes down that road all the time. And there's a little shameless plug.
Well,
Anything else, LJ? Anything else, LJ?
No, man, you are a fucking professional. You know that?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I take it very seriously. Let's go to James, and we have a criminal lawyer on the stage.
Look at that beard. I want to grab it.
James, welcome to Ask the Atheist. What's your question, comment, or concern for your Uncle Steve?
Uncle Steve, what did you have?
However,
deviled eggs, get it?
Fusion 360. You can control
your Uncle Steve is going to a baby shower. I announced it earlier.
Drive your machines. Simulate your...
To have bacon, eggs, toast, and...
The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents Mailbag, Abortion in the Bible, and Buddha Predicted Jesus.
Home... Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and it's all going to be homemade at Casa de Apel.
Yeah, smothered potatoes. You want to make those?
There you go. There, country fried potatoes, whatever. Yeah. James, is there anything else you wanted to say, or just want to hang out and comment?
No, I mean, lunch is one of my favorite subjects. I often ask people about lunch. There's a rabbi on the app who will eat an entire rotisserie chicken and then have a pint of mango sorbet for his lunch. He's my hero. No, that's what I wanted to talk about.
You know, I think the Costco rotisserie chickens are still $5, and they're huge. I don't think they've gone up in price.
Do you think you could eat an entire chicken in one sitting, Steve?
If I was forced to and didn't eat all day, yes, I could for dinner. But would I want to, or breakfast or lunch? No.
For me, chicken is like a dinner for four because it comes with, sides, some kind of, starting thing like a soup or a salad. The idea of eating only chicken, putting the chicken in front of yourself and eating the entire thing just was mind-blowing to me.
I agree with you. And by the way, growing up, speaking of determinism, growing up, your Uncle Steve quite frequently had either iceberg lettuce or romaine lettuce for his salad, with tomato, carrots.
I'm sorry to hear that, Steve.
Yes, onions. But recently, in the past couple of years, and you know what, it kind of started just before the pandemic, your Uncle Steve has been having less romaine lettuce and iceberg lettuce and making more homemade coleslaw. And I am here to tell you how to do it. There you go. There you go. Okay? So I go, because your Uncle Steve shops at 3 markets, okay? Ralph's, Sprouts, and good old Trader Joe's. Uncle Steve loves his Trader Joe's.
Or, Steve, you can join me and President Barack Obama and get on the arugula train.
The arugula train, not to be confused with rugula, but arugula, right?
Arugula.
Yes, that's a type of lettuce.
Rocket.
Yes, exactly. And I don't like kale. Your Uncle Steve doesn't like kale. Very nasty. Very nasty.
So kale is the devil because all the yoga for
I know it tastes like shit. I know that.
All the kale.
I disagree that it tastes like shit. But how much?
I don't know. What's the shit taste like, Ed?
Well, it depends on what you ate. It could be fruity. It could be rancid.
Do you like a little corn in your shit?
Well, I don't know why vegetarians are so hot on kale. I guess it probably has more nutrients or whatever than your average lettuce.
Look, it's part of this faith-based exercise that, you believe these new social movements will help you become a better rounded, healthy person.
Yes.
In the same way that, Christians believe there were 12 apostles.
Yes.
Yoga studios have to believe in kale, and if you don't believe in their superfood, you haven't subscribed to the shibboleth of their religion.
But do you say, James, that even the dietitians disagree with the properties of kale or all these other green leaves?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understood the question.
I think he was asking about...
Can you do psychology next?
I think he was asking about physicians and doctors and the
dietitian.
dietitians and the vitamin and nutrient contents of kale, I think he was asking.
Oh, I mean, like, you can tell me food has vitamins in it. Great. Like, that doesn't make eating one kind of leafy green life-altering. I'm not... And yes, we can do psychology next.
Yeah, your Uncle Steve always grew up that when you have a meal, dinner, you should have all three food groups represented. You know, you have your starch, which is potato or rice or something. You have your vegetable, which is your leafy greens. And then you have some type of protein or meat. Your Uncle Steve has been staying away from red meat or beef.
Steve, I don't mean to bring the smoke, but there are four food groups.
Oh, what is the fourth one?
Fruit.
Right. Yes. And your Uncle Steve normally does not have fruit actually for dinner, but occasionally will have it as a dessert, certainly in the morning or like at lunch, but very rarely does your Uncle Steve have fruit for dinner. It's just a thing. You're right, four food groups. Thank you.
So if we believe Jesus, then I could understand how you could tell what somebody ate by eating their shit, because he did tell us that everything that goes in your mouth comes out the other end. So I guess it would be exactly the same.
You know, there is a coffee bean, I can't remember it, which sheeps eat, they shit it out, and then they collect it, they roast Kapaluak or whatever like that. It's like $300 a pound, and it's supposedly the best coffee in the world, and one of the contributing factors is that sheep, I believe, sheep or goats eat it, they then shit it out, and then they collect the beans and roast them. Kapalua, something like that. I don't know. $300 a pound for coffee.
I want to ask James if psychology is a faith-based practice or a hard science.
Well, it's both. It's both, and I used to get into this all the time with my ex, who was a clinical forensic psychologist at the University of Coventry. It's both, and both do they have like a repeatable scientific method with, you know, hard indicators that particularly example like they use for recidivists, often in sentencing hearings, particularly for certain types of sexual offenses. That's as far as I'll go with that. You know, they have these sheets and you fill them out and they have markers and indicators, and they'll give you like a percentage grade for like, what is the likelihood this person will reoffend? Well, it's been 15 years since, you know, the thing, so no, okay, fine. You know, so they've got a 4% chance, you know, and then you use that to make certain sentencing recommendations. First of all, is it necessary to incarcerate them? Second of all, is it necessary to put them in any kind of counseling? Because if you put them in a counseling group, that can often have negative effects, because, you know, you put them in a group with people who have much higher risk, who are current, you know, sexual predators. So yeah, I mean, that aspect of it is scientific, because you can measure everything you're doing and repeat the experiment. Other aspects of psychology, like psychopathy, are entirely faith-based. And there's a really good TED talk about this, about how pretty much every successful person is a psychopath. Like every head of every, you know, Fortune 500 company has to have, you know, the high level of conscientiousness, the high level of confidence, the high level of intelligence, the ability to like dispassionately separate their emotions from their decision making and make, you know, sometimes narcissistic and selfish decisions. And they had this case they study where this guy, okay, was involved in a fairly brutal crime, not a killing. And he has an option to go to jail, but, you know, he gets a diagnosis as a psychopath, so he goes to the hospital instead. But when he's there, he's a model inmate. He, you know, learns tailoring and starts cutting his own suits. So, you know, he wears these crisp, you know, pinstripe three-piece outfits and shines his nice black leather shoes. You know, he doesn't even look like an inmate. He's an absolute model citizen. He's helping out with the work. He's volunteering. He's sober.
Then that's what I do. And if he brings someone to me, then I...
Begging the question, they're just saying, well, reason just, you know, given enough time and trials, that, you know, eventually order will arise out of chaos, and that order, you know, exudes reason. Based upon what? Can they show me anything other than an appeal to evolution where a reasoning entity arises at a pure time and chance?
Where's John Lee today? Because he loves talking.
Himself through the entirety of creation and through human history, culminating in the person of Jesus Christ. And
so then, why are you talking about this? Argument about?
Did you?
Okay, good. Go ahead.
Did you? Yeah, I'd like to finish.
Sorry.
Okay? And we know this finally through his providential revelation in the Christian scriptures. Okay, that's my position.
Great. So why are you making this other argument that has to do with human reason and how? So then you're canceling that, you're throwing that point out, or where does that fit in, Dark?
Well, in the Christian worldview, what is ultimate, from which all things derive and depend, is the mind of God. And that we human beings possessing a mind and reason and intelligibility are gifted that imbued by God. So the ultimate, which is God, which is a rational mind, exudes a world and imbues certain aspects of that world to be like himself. If that is to be rejected, I want to know how and why reason at all can and does exist.
Okay, so you are proposing an argument that says the existence of reason is at least some little bit of evidence for the existence of God, meaning more than a little bit. Is that right, Dark?
I'm not making an argument. I'm making a declaration of my worldview and then asking a question to those who reject the Christian world, how reason is viable. Now, what is your worldview?
My worldview is that we see a level of reasoning from a wide variety of species. Sometimes, I'm sorry.
Do you believe?
Can you hear me?
Do you believe?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
that's
not a. That's,
could you?
I want you to be quiet.
Okay, okay. I'll just.
If you don't stop, I'll kick you. Okay. Now, you're not giving me a worldview. What you're doing is you're wasting my time. Either you believe in God or you don't believe in God. Which of those worldviews do you hold? You can unmute your mic, okay? Do you hold to the God world or the not God world? Yeah, if you're not going to talk.
No, I didn't appreciate the style of modding. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hit the road. Yeah, I'm well accustomed to somebody filibustering and wasting my time. All I ask is, what is your worldview? Either you believe in God or you don't believe in God. Okay? Do you want to answer that question? Real simple. Okay, hit the road. Yeah, people go on and on and on, and they really don't. They just meander, and they really don't address the question. The central question is either your worldview starts with God or it doesn't start with God.
I believe in God, Darth. But I have no desire to talk to a doofus like you.
See, this is all we're left with. We're left with people who troll, and then people who just spew gobbledygook. Okay? Don't mind if people disagree, but, stop speaking gobbledygook and trolling. It's that simple. Okay. If you want to come up, raise your hand. Come on up. Yeah, you can put your hand down, Lag.
Darth, while we're waiting, what do you think about Sam Harris?
Well, I think he's, in terms of his demeanor, he's less odious than the other, members of the new atheists. But content-wise, it's just as ridiculous. He's simply spewing things that he can speak coherently in his world without God as the final reference point. But in a world without God as the final reference point, there's nothing that is identifiable or defensible that dictates what anything is, can or cannot be. So when he talks about all sorts of stuff about morality and, how does he put it, fulfilling the well-being and all that, that's just more nonsense. In a world without an identifiable ultimate, then anything goes. Nothing's impossible. And if nothing's impossible, then you can't have intelligibility.
So you're saying he just falls under the standard atheist review?
Well, of course he's a real smart guy. There's no doubt about that. But he's in the same conundrum as all the other professional atheists, including the ones that I've talked to, is that they have no fundamental grounding to anything they say. Everything they say is built upon, Z because of Y. Okay, Y because of X. X because of W. And then finally it's I don't know. It's everything that does happen or can happen is in virtue of I don't know. Isn't that a brilliant worldview?
But I am testing a new microphone, so I'm trying to see if the audio is any better. I see Pete in the bottom. Pete, can you type in the chat if this audio is clear or if it sounds bad or muffled or something to that effect? Hey, Johnny, I'm just testing out a new audio real quick and then maybe do a room after a while. If you could type in the chat whether or not the audio is loud and clear or if it's bad. Pete says low volume. Okay. Let me see. I don't know. This will go up then. Hello. Testing, testing, testing. Alrighty, 2 people said volume sounds good. 1 says no. So we will end this room in a minute. And then I'm going to go check the audio and see how that is. And Johnny, I'll see you hopefully in the next room. Pete, good seeing you. Harpel, nice seeing you too.
the word, and you'll have a question and you won't even realize when you open that Bible, it speaks to the question that you have. I'm telling you, this is a real relationship with God. If you are saying, "No, I don't want to hear all that. I just want to know, I just want to know my call. Well,
is with regards to the problem of pain, and that God, does not intervene with the word with full of pain and people diseases, cancer, so on and so forth. So I was wondering what
Yeah,
is your
the
opinion
problem,
on this?
their problem, either the problem is God permitting pain, or the problem is God's timetable to dealing with the issue. The real issue is they do not accept God's plan. They think that they have a wiser plan than God. Well, when they call into question the goodness and righteousness of God for what he has permitted through the course of history and his redemptive plan, they're just simply suffering from megalomania. Only a megalomaniac would claim that they're wiser than God. And that's what most atheists do. They're megalomaniacs. Now, if there's any atheists who reason that it's inappropriate for God to permit death and suffering in the course of human history along his redemptive plan of history, come on up, raise your hand, and tell me how that conclusion is not the product of megalomania. But I doubt that there will be even one atheist who will raise their hand and try to defend that God is wrong for allowing whatever pain and suffering in the course of human history according to his plan. I will be pleasantly surprised if we have one atheist who will come up for the challenge. You see, when they can't troll and filibuster, and they have to answer reasonable, circumspect questions, then they drop away like flies.
They absolutely do, Darth, absolutely. The other thing is that I wanted to ask you about is, you see, I have few of my friends and myself, we also do different rooms in different language, actually in Arabic, to address some issues as well that, the Arab world has.
You speak Arabic?
I do, yes.
Okay,
yes.
Can you do me a favor?
Absolutely.
Okay. Do you have access to the Quran in Arabic?
I do.
Okay. Are you familiar, and you'll forgive my pronunciation, is it makr? Does that mean to scheme, to deceive?
Makr, yes. To deceive,
okay.
A deceiver, yes.
Okay. Does that word in Arabic, does it have any other meaning?
It can connotate a different meaning depending on how you use it. It's makr is coming from a ruse. If you plot a ruse, that's literally what makr is, and it's usually a pejorative, negative, connotation, never positive.
Okay, could you repeat that?
Absolutely. So the word makr is to play a ruse or to deceive in other sense, and it's usually in any context being used. Well, Allah can deceive even better than you. This is the connotation that they're trying to put in the Arabic, of course. Now, in the English, because, deceiving in English sounds extremely bad, especially to the Western society and how we see, God and how we understand God. So it doesn't look good. So they have to kind of clean up a little bit and use different words, twist the meaning here and there to make, God sound less bad compared to the Christian God.
So they are purposely mistranslating the Arabic then. So it's not like we have a word that has a range of meanings given context. Like, for example, there are certain words.
So the Arabic says God is the greatest of all muckers.
Yes, exactly. Greatest of all deceivers. I believe Darth just went on a phone call, so.
Isn't that just calling? Like, how do they reconcile that with the actual meaning of the word?
That's a good question, Martin. In our societies in the Middle East and Arabic speaking people, they don't see a problem with that. Even when we bring it up, they would go, "Oh, listen, these guys, they deceive in a bad way. Well, listen, God can deceive in a good way." So this is how they kind of like reconcile it, by putting words into the text or adding understanding that is not there, or whatever, like twisting the meaning of what the actual verse is trying to convey. So this is what like they go. This is how like they go about, by explaining how come God can be the greatest of all deceivers, and at the same time, actually, no, he's not deceiving in a bad way. No, he's actually deceiving in a good way. They have even like stuff that are really really like weirder than this. By the way, it's crazy how like they have like weird understanding of God, and in fact, like the Christian God, you can see in our scripture, like we portray God and Jesus Christ as like the lover of mankind, right? The fact that he, like, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, right? John 3:16, and so on and so forth, and the letters of Saint Peter and Saint John and Paul and so on and so forth. So you would have like a portray of God that is, a lover of mankind, that is willing to give himself up for those who believe in him, so on and so forth. That's not what they have in their understanding. It's completely different. They don't believe that God is loving at all. That God, will strike literally people from heaven, like because of their doings and so on and so forth. It's really really really, I don't know, like it's a very against a Christian understanding of who God is and why God does this and so on and so forth.
And what is it that I heard that after the Quran was originally made, that there was a period where that they burned them, they gathered them all together and burned them, and they reread it. Is that true?
Yes. So the Quranic manuscripts at the beginning, they had like people memorize them, and then so at some point they wanted to collect the Quran in a volume. So what they did is they brought 2 by 2s and they started, okay, what what did you memorize? So they write down on the paper, and at that time this guy named Osman, this guy this is like the most common Quran that you'd find at every court, the Quran of Osman now. Is he looked at all the Qurans and he found like a lot of differences and a lot of key differences, like huge differences. So he's like, okay, we're gonna take all the ones that have differences, we're gonna burn them down, we're gonna standardize this text, and this is the standard text that we're gonna be sharing with the rest of the world. So they did burn a lot of their manuscripts from early Islamic period, which is sad now, because if you want to look at okay, what were the differences there? Okay, was just the